Welcome to The Grow Show, where we speak with leading business experts to help you grow yourself, grow your business, and grow your community. Now here's your host, Gary Jones.
Hey folks, how you doing? Now welcome to this very special episode of The Grow Show. Now today we are going to feature one of the Q&A sessions from Grow Live 2020. Now if you don't know what Grow Live 2020 is, it is our annual event where we get a selection of our past speakers from The Grow Show, and they come along, and this year was held on Zoom. They come along and do questions and answer sessions, workshops, seminars, talks, basically to help you grow yourself, grow your business and grow your community. And today you're going to hear a Q&A session hosted by Duncan Price, who is the host for day 2 of Grow Live 2020, with the fantastic Allison Reeves. Now she's been a previous guest on The Grow Show, so please check her episode out. But I'm going to hand you over to Duncan so he can introduce Allison, and let's hear and explore the world of bid writing, 10 years, grants, and so much more. Take it away, guys. Thank you very much.
Next up on Grow Live 2020, we've got a Q&A section with Allison Reeves. So Allison is, is a specialist in bid writing and applying for grants and funding. I have never met Allison before. I've never even spoken to her, so I'm going to host this Q&A because that makes perfect sense. So as someone who doesn't know anything at all about bid writing, well, actually, I do know a little bit, but as someone who doesn't know anything about Allison and exactly what she does, I'd really appreciate any help you guys watching live could throw my way in asking questions about what you'd like to know about bid writing and how it can apply. Because that's going to be my first question to Allison, is finding out how it can be useful to understand that better for any business owner, because I'm sure there's some great tips in there in how we approach other things beyond just bid writing in itself. So if you do have questions, whack them into the comments. Allison, before we start, why don't you jump on and just introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about who you are and how you got into doing what you do.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm Allison Reeves and call myself the bid writer. Hi. Okay, how did I get into bid writing? Well, I've been writing my whole career. I won't go into a lot of detail because I could spend 30 minutes on my career, but basically, right from the very start, I was the kid who always enjoyed writing thank you letters when I had birthday presents and Christmas presents from people. And I've always enjoyed not just the actual words, but even just the process. So I'm a big fan of writing with a fountain pen when I write my nice cards and stuff like this. So the whole thing is very me. And I started my career with what I would call, I was termed as a technical author, a technical writer. So what I would do is take technical content of some description and translate that into something that anybody could understand. And this is something I still do for some companies. And the reason I got into bid writing is sort of about halfway through my career. I was given the opportunity to do a marketing degree because I was working in a big organisation and I was basically more on the IT side actually, but I got involved with the marketing department, helping them develop stuff. And it's round about I was developing a marketing database for a big AS400, and they wanted me to understand more about it and help their side of the business. So I went and did this degree and got my degree in marketing. And then I suddenly realised that things like bid writing is very much a cross between technical writing and creative writing, like you would do for copywriting. So more recently, the term technical copywriting has been coined, and it tends to be people who write about more technical stuff. There's a lot of technical companies who want people to read their websites and understand what they do. And that's where that came in. But coming back to bid writing, the reason the two match together quite well is because bid writing is something that I help people do to help them grow their business in a very sustainable way. So they can just keep winning contracts, winning funding, and they can gradually grow their business. But to do that, you have to have a knowledge of the sales side of things as well as the technical writing side. So you pull in the two things together, in order to get your messages across to the people who are marking the content. Does that make sense? Oh, I think you're on mute, Duncan.
Yeah, that makes perfect.
You're on mute again.
Yes, the host muted me. I think he was trying to unmute me as I was unmuting myself, and ended up muting me instead. Apologies for that. Whoopsie. Excellent. So, how much has the bid writing scene changed over the last few years? Because I've been involved in a few charities, so I've done some grant applications, funding applications, which are obviously quite similar. And I've noticed some change from when I did it years and years ago to when I did it a couple of years back. But I imagine it's constantly evolving. So what are the changes going?
Yeah, it's a lot more controlled now by legislation. So as an example of that, for example, a lot of people that I bid for will be bidding to local government, local councils and stuff like that. And what the government have done is they've tasked local councils to achieve certain targets. One of those targets is around using local businesses and smaller businesses as well, which is why it's so important to hopefully the smaller businesses that are watching this. But also they've been targeted with targets around what they call social value, as an example. So they actually brought in legislation in 2013, which says that the council has to concern itself with social value within their area. And what they mean by social value are things like what economic value you as a contractor can bring to that area. So if you, for example, I live in Wolverhampton, if I was to bid for a contract in Wolverhampton, they would say to me, what value can you bring to the local area in terms of the economic value, you know, in other words, am I employing people, or am I bringing value by using local suppliers, that sort of thing. They have to think about the environmental aspect of it. So what do I do that helps them and helps the local community improve their environment? And thirdly, what sort of social value can I bring in terms of volunteering or helping make people's lives better in the area? So that is a question now that you will find on all tenders, which not that long ago you didn't find at all. But if you don't know how to answer that, that can actually trip a lot of people up, because they need to understand why the question is being asked and how they can actually tick the box and get some marks for it.
And it strikes me that thinking about those questions is something that every business owner should be doing. Like, if we think about what really matters and how we can give back to the local area, to the environment, to whatever it may be within the context of those questions, that's something that will help us to grow as a business, help others around us, and also people like working with small businesses that do care about their local area or whatever it might be. Yeah. So I guess that starts to answer the question, which I was going to ask a bit earlier, which is, why should every business owner, why should we, who don't necessarily think about tendering for local government, etc., how can your experience help us to understand what we do better?
Well, the problem is, you say that if you don't tender for work, a lot of people say, oh, I can't be bothered to get involved in that, it's too involved. It's actually not as involved as it seems once you understand the process. And the problem is now that what the government have also done is task councils. They have to run their procurement, as we call it, which is their buying department, in a way that does not discriminate against anybody. And the only way they can do that is by putting a tender out and asking everybody exactly the same questions and then marking the answers. And then the person who gets the most marks gets the contract. Now, obviously, there are lots of ways of how that works. Some of the contracts have more emphasis on price, for example, some less. It depends on the contract. But I think that the thing is, there's a whole raft of work out there that small businesses can be doing and making money from that they can't do if they don't tender for it. Now, when you tender for business, you don't actually win the contract. You actually tender to go onto what's called a framework. And many people say to me, well, I don't really want to do that because that's just another layer of work. But the point is that if you're not on that framework, which essentially is like a buyer's list, if you're not on that, you can't sell to these people, you can't sell to the council. And it's becoming increasingly obvious that these are becoming more and more stringent. I mean, about at one time, you know, you could go and have a game of golf with somebody from the council and they like the look of you and they managed to get around it some way. They can't do that anymore because there are rules in place now to stop that. So I think for me, it's about smaller local businesses actually having the chance to have a bite at that cherry in terms of the business that they've always in the past thought was only for bigger businesses.
Absolutely, and it sounds like, so I didn't know that my local government or council would have targets to work with local businesses. That's
yeah.
Sounds like it creates a great opportunity. So how does one go about finding out what opportunities there are? Can we just approach our local council and suggest our services and talk about what we do, or do we need to wait until they're actively looking for people to tender for a specific contract?
Right. Well, there's two ways to answer that. First of all, I very much subscribe to what you said earlier, or what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about the Facebook ads and things. People buy from people at the end of the day. So obviously what you want to do is bring across your personality, but if you can actually, if they can be aware of you beforehand, then that is really important because you're not a surprise pop-up on the day when they come to mark the tenders, if you like. So my suggestion would be most local councils, local governments, they put on procurement days and stuff like that, and you can go along to these days free of charge. You generally have to register for them, and they usually give you a cup of tea and a biscuit, and well, not so much at the moment, but they used to. But they're also running them live at the moment on things like Zoom and Teams and stuff like that. And what they're doing is they're still putting their procurement out, but they run these events so they can get to know local suppliers and local suppliers can get to know them and they can understand what the council is looking for. So that would be my first thing, is definitely go to any event. So if you Google your local council and then procurement. So for me, Wolverhampton Council procurement, Wolverhampton Council tenders. What will happen is you'll find there'll be pages come up that you can investigate, which will tell you how they do it. Now, each council does it slightly differently, unfortunately. They don't all follow exactly the same rules. The other thing is that there are a number of what we call portals. Some of them are national, some of them are local. And those portals are where they advertise the tenders, and you can go on and say, yeah, I want to have a go at that one. I'm going to register for that one. Now, I have got a document you can download from my website, which actually talks exactly about this, and it tells you where to find your own local tenders, where all the portals are, the specialist portals and stuff like that. So if you want to jump on, I will put, if I can, I will pop my website in here, which is www.thebidwriter.com, and it's got loads and loads of links that you can click on and go to all these different portals. Now, there's two ways you can do this. You can either go onto the portals yourself and have a little look round, have a search round, and then find the tenders yourself, register on the portal and put a bit of information about yourself. And what will happen is you can set up keywords that you want. When those keywords are triggered, you get an email and it tells you that there's a tender available. And there's also paid for services, but that's all explained in the document for you. So finding the tenders is not actually as difficult as people think. It's just knowing where to look, knowing where to search. You still have to go and find them, but it's knowing where to look, isn't it, really?
Excellent. So we're talking about bids and tenders. What's the difference?
Right.
Just simple question.
It's
really
just terminology, actually. A tender is something that somebody puts out. So somebody will say, I need to buy paper clips. Let's put a tender out and see who would like to supply us with paper clips. A bid is what you put in response to that tender. So you're bidding for the work. You're answering the questions that they've set. Sorry, I've got a hair in my eye. You're answering the questions that they set, and you are providing a price for the service that you want to give them, and that's your bid. So a tender is something that's issued in order to buy something. A bid is your response. In other words, this is how we do the job, and this is how much it would cost. A proposal, which is like the next sort of level down, if you like. Some companies will actually say, can you put a proposal in to provide us with X, Y, and Z? And what you would do is talk about the way that you would provide that product or service and the cost. And then obviously a quote tends to be the sort of real basic level where you're giving a bare outline of what you're supplying and a price attached to it. So they're all slightly different.
So I'm just looking around at just a handful of the people that are watching live. We've got a web designer on here. We've got a graphic designer on here. We've got a performer, magician. We've got, so there's loads more. I'm not going to list everyone. So these are probably all businesses that haven't really considered doing work for a local authority.
Yeah.
No, it's not something that I probably would.
It's not just local authorities. It could be housing associations. It could be big companies. You know, for example, we've got a big company in Birmingham, Cadbury's Chocolate, as we've probably all heard of. They will put stuff out to tender. And that is a little bit more complex, finding tenders for individual companies. But that is down to you doing your homework, doing your doing your normal marketing and becoming aware of them, getting on their radar. And then they may say, well, I'm sorry, but we have to put it out to tender. So you say, well, when's the next tender going out? And even if it's in 2 years' time, you can put that in your diary. And then a month before, you can start making sure that you're on their list. But yes, as a small business, the other thing to look at is things like local Chamber of Commerce and all the local groups like that surround us. They do. I mean, my local Chamber of Commerce quite often puts stuff out to tender. I did some training for them in bid writing training for local businesses, which they commissioned during, I think they were using some European money for that. But they have certain funding that they fund things like, you know, events or training sessions, and they will put those out to tender as well.
Excellent. So what part do you play in that? Obviously, you help write the bid or tender, but because it sounds scary. In fact, the chief monkey, Chris from Scruffy Monkey Web Design, he's saying that he's got councils as his clients.
Yes.
And quite rightly, he says, it sounds scary. And it does sound a bit scary, but people like yourself can be really helpful. So what role do you actually play? Because I'm sure you do more than just filling out the form for us, right?
Yeah, well, I provide different services, because the problem is when people say to me, how much does it cost to use you to help me write this tender? It's like, how long's a piece of string? And the reason is because each tender can be quite different in the amount of information that is provided. So you can get some really straightforward ones, and you can get some much more complex ones. So the way I see my role is, first of all, my role is to help explain to people what that process is and what they need to think about in terms of, I've got another document that I give my clients called a tender ready checklist. So, for example, there's loads of stuff that you can have ready and in a subdirectory on your machine, ready to go when the tender becomes live, because there's certain standard things they always ask for. Like, for example, they always ask for a complaints policy and what is your escalation process and stuff like that. Well, if you've got that stuff already, they might ask you about quality management, or they might ask you about your equality and diversity policy. So I help people set all those things up in the first place, so they are what I call tender ready. So they're in a position where they can tender and they can tick all the boxes. And sometimes tenders can be really straightforward, and some of my clients will actually create all of their like their standard questionnaires and stuff like that, and I just check them over for them. And then there is also the quality bits of it, which is where we answer the questions. Now, sometimes I'll do that all for people, and that's a more expensive option because I need to almost get the information out of their brain, take it from previous tenders they've done, just basically get the information and present it in a way that's going to get them the most marks. And part of my role there is to understand what exactly they're getting at in the question, because a lot of people don't answer the question. That's the simplest, biggest problem people have with tenders, is they do not look at the question and think, why are they asking me that question? What do I need to include in the answer? Sometimes they'll almost lay it out for you exactly what they want, and people still don't do it properly. It's quite interesting, actually. Now, some of my clients actually are fairly keen to keep, their costs down, or they may have done quite a few tenders and they feel more comfortable in writing answers. So what some of them will do is write their own answers and then send them to me to edit and review. So I've got different layers of services depending. The other thing that I do for a lot of my clients is write case studies for them, sort of long ones and short ones, depending upon what they need. So it's quite multi-layered, really. It really depends on what's needed. And the better I get to know my client, the easier it becomes for me to do a lot of this work for them. I have one or two clients where they literally just throw the tender at me and I write the whole thing and then they just rubber stamp it at the end. But we've been working together for 4, 5, 6 years, and I know their business almost as well as they do now. We talk about all the things that they're doing and the changes that they're making, and I love clients like that. Actually, I like to be part of their business. Like a trusted advisor almost, that helps them develop and grow.
Excellent. See, I remember years ago now, before I even did what I do now, I started a charity. It was a charity film company. Be completely honest, I started a charity film company because I wanted to play with fun new toys and they were very expensive and I couldn't afford them. So I decided I'd get my local council to afford them for me as well. But that meant we did it in such a way that it got kids off the street and gave them something positive and proactive to do, which was learning video editing and that side of things. But in doing so, I had no idea what I was letting myself in for when I first started that. And the first time that I had to fill out a grant application, this was actually to the local police force, because they had a lot of funding available for projects that got people off the street and doing something useful. The first time I had to fill one out, I remember reading through and I'd read the same question 4 times and still just not really get it at all. But actually, just speaking it through with someone, it wasn't even someone like yourself who's an expert, it was just someone who was different and outside of the box that I was stuck in. It was really, really helpful. Each time that I filled one out, it's just been easier and easier. The first time can be a bit daunting, but once you start, you really get into it, don't you?
I think as well, it's about having a certain amount of empathy, particularly with grant funding. It's understanding why they're asking those questions and what difference it makes to them as an organisation. And what's keeping them awake at night as to why they would ask that question. What problem are they trying to stop, by asking that question? Why would they want to know that about you or your business? And it's about thinking those things through and understanding their point of view. So I always think people who are empathetic make really good bid writers, because they can put themselves in the sort of in the shoes of the person who is looking to buy and understand what they're looking for.
Absolutely. So yeah. Simon said in the comments, I might need to start applying for some councils. He's then been reminded that he's actually already done some work for some under white label from someone else. But yeah, I think a lot of what you've been saying has left me thinking, and other people thinking, actually, there's opportunities out there that as small business owners, they're being told that they need to use us, and we're not shouting about it. We're not ready and talking to them about using our services. So really simply, where do we start? Do we just start by Googling it and looking for those tenders?
No, the first thing that you need to do is download my document, which tells you where to find tenders. Yeah. And the other thing that I do is I offer a 15-minute free call, which means that I can speak to an individual person about their individual business in their particular area and just troubleshoot a few ideas as to how they can get started. And the reason I say that is because it isn't one size fits all for every type of business, you know, and it's about understanding what it is that you could potentially offer and thinking about where that might be. Now, personally, for a small business, there's another little rule actually that's useful to bear in mind, and that is that generally speaking, you won't get awarded a tender if the value of the tender is more than 25% of your business turnover. Now, the reason for that is because what they don't want to do is be too big a customer, if you like, and they feel that if they're too big a customer, other of your customers might suffer, and also it puts you in a dangerous position because you have too many eggs in one basket, to use an old-fashioned phrase. So what I suggest that people do initially is go and have a look for some very local work that's fairly low value, depending on your turnover. I mean, obviously your turnover might be bigger, but that's why it's important to have this 15-minute conversation, because we can talk about these things and I can give you an idea of what to look for. And then once you start building and winning those little contracts, what happens is they add up and your turnover grows. It's almost grows exponentially, you know, because you're winning new contracts, you're getting bigger, and then you can go and get new people in. And it's understanding also that what's behind the tender. So, for example, I've got a lot of cleaning companies that I write for, and they have to deal with things like 2P. In other words, they take over the staff that are currently doing the work for another company. And there's a whole process involved. So I can advise them around not so much the process, because that's more of an HR role, but I can help them understand what their requirements are, and then they can use potentially a freelance HR expert if they don't have somebody in their business or something like that, to make sure they've actually done the process correctly. But once they've done that once, then they know they can do it again and again and again. It's just a process that you repeat. So my suggestion would be, I mean, you know, you don't have to use me to do anything. It's completely no obligation. But I always feel that if I can just have 15 minutes to talk to somebody, I can put them right on the right road in the very first place, so they're not wasting any of their time. And then they can say, right, this is what I think I'd like to do, and they can go ahead with that.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Alison, thank you so much.
Sorry. I was going to say, having your business tender ready is also important. So, you know, if people talk to me, I usually send the list out to them and tell them what they need to have in place before they start, so they're not wasting their time.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alison. That's been actually really insightful. I'll be honest, I saw, you know, talk about tenders and bids. That's not going to be of much interest to me.
Boring, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But no, you've made it very interesting, and you've made me even consider talking to my local council again, which after the last time I didn't think would be something I'd consider. Yeah, no, thank you very much, Alison. It's been absolutely brilliant having you on board. Cheers.
Thank you.
We've got some comments coming in now as well. Cheers, Alison. That was great. So yes, ladies and gents, let's give a virtual or unmuted literal round of applause to Allison Reeves.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
I'll mute myself now.
What a fantastic Q&A session. Now, thank you very much, Duncan. Thank you very much, Allison, for taking part in this. And if you wanted to see all of the talks, all of the seminars, all the workshops from Grow Live 2020, you can. It's all available on Catch Up service, so please check out the link in the show notes. But also, if you want to take part in Grow Live 2021 as a speaker or a guest, details will be on that same link, so please go and check it out. But thank you very much for watching this very special episode of The Grow Show. Take care, my friends, and I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Grow Show. With new shows available every week, if you know anyone else who could benefit from these powerful insights, please share this podcast with them. And don't forget to subscribe.